try again. Yeah. Well, welcome everyone. Talofa Lava in this Samoan Language Week. And this is our final session of the Pilgrims of Hope series. And it's been a really inspiring series, I think. And it's spoken to me of, well, community, being neighbourly, just building relationships, and it's been a really fun series. And tonight we welcome Ross Reitz and Cyril Lawis, and they're going to talk to us about the English language program that's been running over at the Mercy Room on a Monday night. So Ross and his wife Jess, who unfortunately Jess can't be here tonight with us, but they're both from the United States and they've been here for about 5 years. And Cyril and his wife and family are from the Philippines, and they've been in Dunedin for about 8 years. So between them, between Jess and Ross and Cyril, they've got a wealth of experience in varied ways, and they've really enriched our community with the things that they've brought as they've come to New Zealand. So one of those things is this English language program which has been set up, and I just think it's such an awesome way. It's such a practical way of being a welcoming community, and we can all participate in that. And it's such a fun thing as well. And I'll leave Ross and Cyril to talk more about it. But anyway, so over to you, Ross and Cyril. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'd just like to talk just briefly about why I volunteer and with Jess and Ross and this English tutoring and my experience. So the English tutoring class that I've been involved in last year was involved with refugees. We tried to teach them English through practical work, so that would be in the kitchen. And this year, Ross and Jess were thinking about tutoring people in English for those people who wants to get IELTS or TOEFL, anything that gives them a chance to migration opportunities and higher education. So when I volunteered this one, I thought this is a good ministry, because in my experience when I came here, learning a second language is a bit difficult and challenging. I found myself in the first years, especially in New Zealand, with an accent. So you get learning this language and plus hearing the accent. So I found myself saying what's that? Can you repeat it? Pardon? And sometimes it's frustrating. You wanted something to say, but couldn't find the vocabulary or the grammar to say it. So I find it frustrating sometimes. And what I find is that with this ministry, I think we are equipping people, empowering them for the future. And because I think with the ministry, we're meeting a felt need. These people have something they need to learn. They need to, in order to equip themselves in the future. So that future could be, like I said, migration opportunities, higher education, or better jobs. And, in my experience, I thought English is I think a mission tool for me, because when you learn something that is not your second language, there's this language is for me is like identity. So when you're learning new things, sometimes you feeling you lost your identity. So there's a frustration of trying to, you're limited with limited knowledge. Like you're trying to use a tool that's limited. You're trying to express your thoughts and feelings with limited tools. So there's a chance where, like, you think you're competent in your native language, but now you're trying to use it in a different language, and you cannot really express yourself. So yeah, I can understand people, trying not to talk to you, especially with not born and bred here, because they're probably, in my experience, they don't want to talk to you because they cannot find the words to say, or might be afraid of being, I don't know, harshly corrected or something. But so when in this ministry, it was gratifying for me, because I see this in last year, most of them were refugees. So most of them are non-Catholic, non-Christian. And so I thought this ministry is opening a safe place, a non-threatening entry point where they can just, learn, be encouraged, us, Abraham and Ross, being patient with them, which is, the characters of a Christian, in, having that, space can build trust and, help them, diminish the vulnerability that they have. So last year, we were teaching them practical ways in the kitchen. So we could have like flashcards, like, okay, so what do you call this one? It's like a glove. Okay, so they write it and they say it. This is a thermometer probe. So they write it, and such and such. So they've got apron and all this stuff in the kitchen, and they're also taught about the critical temperature. If this chicken is stayed in the room for about 2 hours, is it in a critical temperature or is it in a danger zone? So it's both learning English in a practical way. And I think I've just involved like 2 or 3 sessions. Busy. I'm also busy with my young family. So I think that was really gratifying for me. It really, I think it helps people equipped to in their lives, and help them be fully involved in the community instead of being like isolated. This year, we thought of looking at teaching people who are looking into taking exams like IELTS and TOEFL. And I've taken IELTS myself before coming here, and I know how hard it is, like especially with speaking. Sometimes it's bias, like the person talking to you, sometimes like a conscious bias, like, okay, your grammar is this and that. So yeah, I feel them. So unfortunately, I had some concussions. I was only involved like one session, but that session was, I think they were like, my table group was like a Filipino, was it a French, an Indian, somewhere in the South America. It's a very broad range. And so yeah, I think, if I remember, if the memory is right, I think we were mostly rearranging sentences, which is part of the exams, English exams, and fill in the blanks where which is the right verb for that one, or which is the right adjective for that one. And so yeah, I think that's just the experience that I had this year. I'm just trying to recover quickly with my concussion, so I can now go into the next tutoring lessons with the team. So yeah, that's all I can say. So thank you.
Hi, thank you for coming out. On last Sunday, Cyril and I talked about what we were going to say, and I had this whole plan, and I sat down, and I don't think that's the plan. Usually I'm very straight line and forward, and this isn't coming out real forward. I think it's coming out a little bit, maybe more emotional. So hopefully there will be some linearness with it. I was thinking about, how did I get interested in this? How did I even get involved in this? And I don't know. I don't know how I got involved in it. I don't know how I fell in love with my wife either. I just know that I did, right? Eventually she was just like always there, and I wanted her always there, and I think as I fell in love with my wife, I was also learning to fall in love with Jesus, and I wanted to be around Jesus. And when you want to be around Jesus, you want to be around the people that Jesus is around. And I started to look a lot in the Bible at who does Jesus hang out with, and who does God throughout the whole Bible hang out with. And there's a verse I really like from 1 Corinthians. It says, God chose the lowly things of this world and the despised things and the things that are not to nullify the things that are. Where this gets to me is in the United States, we worked with a lot of people that are considered not citizens. And it's a big thing to be a not. People who are, that gives them a way to look down at you. It gives them a way to mistreat you. Not everybody will, but there are definitely people who will take that advantage. And we saw people being taken advantage of. And one of the things that I thought about that sometimes I cling to is a verse in Philippians that says, for our citizenship is in heaven. And when we're seeing kind of the rise of nationalistic Christianity in multiple places where God is recast as an American, or God is recast in a political party, it's a lot different to think about our citizenship is in heaven. As much as it's great to be an American or to be a New Zealander, our citizenship is in heaven. And if our citizenship is in heaven, how does that change how we view the world? How does that view who we accept? How does that view who we hang out with? So those are some of the things that I've been trying to go through and think of in my own life. Another verse that's really important to me comes from the book of Galatians. In Galatians, Cyril and I were talking about this. We've both been getting into Galatians lately, and there's this whole battle where some people are saying, well, you have to follow the whole law. You have to have Jesus, but you have to follow the whole law, right? And it all becomes about following these rules and having this outwardly perfect life and being with the right people and doing the right things. And of course that kind of culminated in everybody needs to be circumcised, right? Because then we'll be doing the right things and we'll all look the same, or at least half of us will. And so Paul kind of does this whole argument, and he builds it up to this point where he says, For in Christ Jesus, neither circumcision nor uncircumcision has any value. The only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. And what I love about that is becoming a Catholic as an adult. That verse was huge for me because growing up outside of the Catholic tradition, we were all about faith. We heard about faith all the time. We never heard about love, right? Because it was all about just belief, right? As long as you believe you're good, you can do whatever you want, and it's all good. But it says the only thing, singular. There's only one thing that counts, and that's faith expressing it through love. Our faith in Jesus Christ isn't faith in Jesus Christ if there's no love. Like, who Jesus is so full of love that as we believe in Jesus Christ, we have to love. And that's really challenging. One of the sermons about probably, well, it was before Easter, that Father Michael gave that just really hit me, was when he was talking, so many religions have a version of the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But Christianity is the one that says, love your enemy. And how that impels us to go beyond just our circle, beyond just where we feel comfortable. So in 1995, I graduated with my master's degree, and I felt really good about myself, and I thought I was really smart. My master's degree was in molecular microbiology and immunology, and that was really kind of cool to say. It was also kind of cool to say that my master's thesis was in maternal pregnancy, maternal is pregnancy, malaria infestation during pregnancy, right? And I felt really good about that. And I finished that master's degree, and I felt good. And the next year I traveled to Africa, and I lived there for 2 years. And I lived in this village up on a mountain at 9,000 feet, where it is in Africa, but it got so cold one year that we actually got 3 feet of snow in one storm. And it took a month to melt. But I went there with no knowledge of the language. And just kind of like Cyril was talking about how you want to say the right word and you don't have the grammar. Going from having a master's degree and feeling really good about myself to having people try to teach me the basics of the language and treating me like a child. They didn't mean to treat me like a child, but that's who doesn't know the language, right? And the way they were trying to teach me was, mama and papa and things like that. And it was, there were times I felt like I was one of those knots that Paul was talking about. So I lived in Africa for 2 years. I fell in love with being there. I returned to the United States. And in our moving around, the last place we moved before we came here, my wife got a job with the Literacy Council for our town. Our town had a literacy council because adults could not read in our town. Adults could not read in our town because in 1970, when the court order came for the public schools to integrate, our state decided to close all public schools for a year rather than integrate. This was a boon for Catholics because Catholic schools accepted students in, and that brought people into the church, and we developed a much more varied church. But there were a lot of people who got cut out of school that year and then went and got jobs and never came back because they were supporting their family. So the ministry there started with trying to educate Americans, but as people were moving in there, into the town, more and more, we started doing English as a second language. And I think when we got to New Zealand, and I had a job, but my wife didn't have a job, and we were looking around, and I said, well, you know, why don't you volunteer? There's a literacy council here, and why don't you volunteer? And she started volunteering with English language partners, and that's where we really got into working with refugees, and that opened our eyes so much, and we really enjoyed that. But then, as the laws changed, there is funding from the national government for refugees. There is no funding for people who are here on a work visa to learn English. And so as we kind of talked about what kind of ministry we wanted to do, and as we became really interested in this, we came to pastoral council, and we had our ideas of what we were going to do, and somebody in pastoral council said, well, what about these new laws that have come through that now you have to pass an academic English test the next time you apply for your visa? And we're like, oh, we don't know anything about that. And so we went back and we started researching. And I think that's one of the things that's hard. A lot of the people that we're tutoring speak very good English, but it's not academic English. And it is kind of interesting that they're having to pass an academic English test that is going to test them on their knowledge of English about astronomy and their English and knowledge about biology, because they want to work as a mental health worker or laying tiles or all these other jobs. But it's not just them, it's also their spouses, and it's also their 16-year-old children. So this is where it becomes a big thing. I'm a nurse, and so I work with an awful lot of nurses. And you know, the nurse themselves is quite educated in English for the medical field, but their spouse may not be. So when that next visa comes up, that could be a big point of tension. And so that's a lot of why we really want to get into this, and really help people be able to have the chance to stay together, and have a better life. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ross. Thank you, Cyrus. Sorry, has anyone got any questions for Ross? Or Cyrus?
So one thing that's very interesting about that is, so I am a nurse, but I also, do I need the microphone?
Oops. If you didn't hear, the question was, it would be interesting to know how many of us could pass that academic paper. That's a very good question. So one of the things that is really interesting is I am a nurse, but I also teach at Otago Polytechnic at the nursing school. And a lot of the same problems that my students have with writing are the exact same things that are being tested. That is in part why we did choose where we are fortunate is New Zealand has allowed 4 different tests that people can test for. And this is where talking to many of our friends who had immigrated to New Zealand and had to take the different tests, they told us which test was the least culturally biased and which test was, I mean, it's still a hard test. We were just talking about that. It still is a hard test, but we're really aiming for something that we feel is more fair. So yeah, so what are the different parts of this test? So there's four main parts: listening, speaking, writing, and reading. What I do like about this test is as you're kind of going along, it kind of builds you up to the essay. There's different ways that it does it. So some of them are just simply repeating, answering words back, repeating sentences, which actually ends up to be the hardest one. We thought, oh yeah, it's just repeating a sentence. How hard can that be? Like that's awful, right? And then, you know, they start out okay, and then they throw in words like economic scale of accommodation or things like that. So not every question is like that, but yeah, those are kind of the higher end questions, but they can be intense. Some of the reading questions will be like fill in the blank, but then they go into like filling in different kinds of grammar, like figuring out which kind of grammar you would put in that sentence. But what's cool of how they have built up in the test towards the essay writing and kind of how we've designed the class for the essay writing to be the last thing. One of the tests is you have a paragraph and it's all printed out, but it's out of order, and you have to figure out how to put it in order. So that's where it's really cool, where you're looking for, okay, which one of these is going to be the topic sentence, and which one of these says the word as a result or finally or something like that. You know that goes at the end. And which one of these will have like a pronoun, like he or she? Well, you can't use he or she until you know who he or she is talking about. So you know this sentence comes after that. So it kind of starts with that and putting that logic together. And then there's a series of different kinds of summaries. Some summaries are spoken. Some summaries have to be between 50 and 70 words long. The one summary that's hard is it can only be one sentence, but you're supposed to have like 3 points and use connecting words. So yeah, it's still very hard. But all of those then kind of build up to the essay. Where hopefully as you're going along and incorporating those skills, when you get to the essay, you can use some of those in that.
If you were to highlight a case of where a not came in, initiated to an S and then became an R, is there a particular case that you can share with us or the story of?
Okay, sorry, I do have a little bit of a hearing problem. Could you try that one more time for me? A not who came in, yeah. That's a beautiful question. And I think that's something Jesus is doing to all of us. He's slowly making that transformation. This is what I can say. We have had 2 students who have gone through and have passed their exam. So we're very excited about that. Those people were closer to the R end than the not end. Abraham and I were just talking and kind of planning around because we are having people come in of very different levels. And we're trying to take the next step. And I think that's the thing. And this is where, you know, I talked about faith and love being one thing. You know, and I'm focusing on love, but the other part is the faith and trusting God. We don't really know what we're doing, and you really have to come through on this one because we don't have it. Yeah, but he is. He is. Yeah. Yeah. So how do you become an R, and how do you help other people become an R? So there, believe it or not, there was actually another Bible verse I didn't share, and this is the one, Matthew 25. So Matthew 25, where there's the judgment at the end, and God separates the sheep and the goats, and he looks at the. We won't worry about the goats. We're going to look at the sheep. He looks at the sheep who are going to be accepted into his kingdom, and and they're like, "When did we ever serve you?" And he's like, "Well, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. When I was a stranger, you welcomed me. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was sick, you healed me. When I was in prison, you visited me." When I became a Catholic back in the United States, one thing that our church did one year was we took those very seriously. And we had 12 months, there's 6 of those, and there's 12 months of the year. So in January and July, we fed people. In February and in March, we gave money to build wells. February and August. And then we had one that was about welcoming strangers, and one that was about clothing the needy. And we went through all 6 of those. And I think that's what's so awesome, because God has brought Jessica and I and our tutors into this ministry with immigrants, but that's not all of God's work, right? God needs people to go to the prisons. God needs people to feed the hungry. God needs people to clothe those who who don't have enough. And God needs people just to show love, right? And I think that's how we become an R, because why I like that question is R is a plural. R is not a singular. It's not is. We don't go really, I don't think, from becoming a not to an is. We become a not to an R. We become a community. And it's in that community that love is really shown. And that's when we become an R, because there's more than one of us. We're together. This is being recorded, so I do want to be careful. I think it depends on what the intention is of the people who are giving the test. Do I think that this is not the best test for people who are working extraordinarily hard, who go to work and do 40 to 60 hours a week at a manual job where they are proficient in the English that they need to be able to do their job and to communicate generally in society? No, this is probably not the best test. But this is the test we have, right? This is the test we have. and we work within the confines that we have been given, and then we pray real hard. Okay. Yeah. So we have had as many as 20 and as low as 6, depending on the day. Rainier days and colder weather generally have less. We have had people from the Philippines, India, Bangladesh, I am not exactly sure which country they're Kurds, so that could be Turkey or Iraq or Syria. France, Argentina, I think that, yeah. I think that's, yeah. China and Japan. Yeah, thank you, yeah. And Ukraine. We have one from Ukraine. Yeah. Yeah, both. It depends if we have 20 or if we have 6. Is it okay if I ask somebody to answer? Mary, would you be willing to talk about, sometimes if I don't have students, I sit back and I watch Mary teach, because it's really fun. And Mary is someone that when we fill out who's going to have who for the day, Mary is the last one that we fill out because we know that Mary works well with everybody. So I would love to have Mary talk about whether you have 20 or like, you know, do you do a group or do you do individual and what that's like?
Well, first of all, I just say why I'm involved. I went to a meeting about 20 years ago in the States. It was all English speakers, and however, there were people from various, it was an international meeting, people from various countries, and there was this youngish woman who I spoke. And she said to everybody, what did she say? And I could hear her say, what did you say? And anyway, long story short, she didn't understand my accent. She was American, her parents were Americans, but she grew up in Mexico near the border with the States, such that her mother maintained an American postal address, and every week they went into the States to get their mail. So she had what you would call English as her first language, but also really she was dual because she lived in Mexico and went to school there. Now, many people here have complimented me when I read how clear I am, and yet I was unintelligible to somebody who knew English. She was a teacher by trade, so that's why I've got involved, because for me, I'm aware that our language is a different thing. So, yes. Ross will always hear me talk because I do speak a lot of the time with the students, and I also love having a second tutor with me in the group because they have a slightly different way of saying things, and I feel that this is so important for the people who are having to do the tests, because English is so natural to us. I'm also a tutor by profession, and I know that most secondary pupils that I have tutored would not pass the test. I'm very sorry to say. But anyway, what do I do? I mean, it's building a rapport with each of those people as fast as you can, because they all come with their needs. There are cultural differences, like I have one woman, she sees that being humble and not saying anything is a very good way to behave. Now, you actually don't want her to hold back. You want her to give it a go, to try. And for me, the whole tutoring is a learning thing about different people and different cultures and trying to work with them. I love it when there's only one or two, but it's trying to look at them each as individuals, although we all have the same sentences or whatever to work through with them. And reading out to them and that kind of thing. So it is a very interesting. I find it very keeps me on my toes for that hour and a half. But if anybody has any other specific questions about what we do with them, but I feel it's that relationship, and we're so lucky that I have, the maximum I've had is 6, and there's usually 2 of us there, so we get to, a person each side if they're writing, so that, they can ask you questions and that kind of thing. I mean, it is, and I just take my hat off to Ross and Jess. You have no idea, the help that they give us, the plan and all that is truly wonderful. And you just turn up and it's all there ready to go. I mean, you need to look at it beforehand, but they are wonderful, and it's such a pleasure to be involved. And I'm really delighted that Ross actually agreed to speak to us.
Yes.
I just wonder, hearing about this piece and front of my head about, how is it relevant and would other people pass it? I think it's great that we're doing, it's marvelous what we're doing, but when we see something like this that seems a little bit unfair, I'm running a church, I've written to Muslim leaders about doing something like that. Should the church almost be advocating on behalf of these lovely refugees who are here working, wanting to stay in our country, who are probably being put, I feel, in a little bit of an unfair position compared to themselves? And we've seen half the people wouldn't be able to pass it. So, is it fair if we show love to these people? We should be trying to help them as much. And I wonder if there's something else that could be done, the submission from the church about this unfair test that these refugees who love to be here are having to go through to be able to stay.
I think you're very correct there, Russell. Reflecting on our 6 weeks, we started off with the young Vinnies and the students involved in social justice from Trinity College, and we listened to them and about them working and supplying the food bank and doing fundraisers and things like that. And then we heard from Mel from Catholic Social Services about the the work that the agency has to do in order to bring families up, to bring individuals, to keep families safe, to help people that are vulnerable. And then we heard from St. Francis Trust about the work with firewood and logs, keeping families warm in their home, about meals going out to communities and to schools, going out to families. And then we have soup and buns. And I remember last year, I was preparing some soup and buns early in the afternoon, and a couple of Indian nurses came in. And they came in for a wee prayer. And then I said, the soup's not ready, but if you come back soon, you can have some soup. And they said, oh, we've actually got our lunch. Do you mind if we eat our lunch here in the foyer? I said, no, carry on. So they had their lunch, and then they had some biscuits. And I took out a packet of biscuits thinking they'd take a couple. They took the whole packet, which was lovely. And then I talked to them about, and their English wasn't that great. And then I talked to them because they were hoping to work in one of the rest homes here. But it sounded like they weren't going to be successful. And they had spent, obviously, with their family, a lot of money training to be nurses, coming over here, and then maybe not having a job. And I worry that our society, that we're putting vulnerable young Indian women in our society, and what happens to them when they don't get a job, and how can they go back to their community in India, and how can they finance that? And that's a real concern. And then we heard from Colette about nursing in South Sudan among those who are very poor, whose language, English, is very difficult for those who don't go, well, if you don't go to school, you don't get. So it's only the very privileged that became nurses that you were able to educate and to work with. And then we had Jackie from St. Vincent de Paul talking to us about working with vulnerable families and people, and the food bank and the work that done has. And then we heard from Ross and Cyrus today about giving people a hand up so that they can stand tall in our society. That's what I hear you saying, with a lot of love, with a lot of willingness to give. And so, happy birthday, Mary. And thank you all for coming. I'm sorry. Apologies from Liza, who usually plays a piano and sings for us so beautifully. Apologies from Amy, who, if Liza's not here, sings and leads us in the music so beautifully. Both of them are sick tonight. I will not in any way attempt to lead you in music, but we do have our prayer that we created for our reflections here. And if we can get it up on the screen, is it possible? No, it's not. Things haven't gone wrong. Right all the time for this. I thank you, really appreciate it. I've really enjoyed our sessions together, and I think that I'd love that we could do it again. Maybe I'll just read the prayer, and then we'll maybe try and sing. We've got some of the choir here. We might try and sing. I'll just read the prayer for us. Thank you.
Is that one?
Yeah, even our yes, even our skilled technician here can't get her.
Wait 5 minutes for it to restart.
Yeah. I'll read the prayer and then we'll sing. Right. Living God, however poor our prayer is, As pilgrims, we search for you with confidence, and your love carves out a way forward through our hesitations and even through our doubts. Amen.